Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. There is a lot going on in this world right now, and breaking down the economics of it all can be quite difficult. And really, we don't know what's going to happen. I've been pleasantly surprised to witness the likes of Russia and China and Iran who have said, no, they're not going to bend the knee to the Trump administration. I kind of incorrectly predicted that they would do that. But when it comes to economics, matters of military might, or even cultural values, they have stood strong. And these are some of the key pillars of the multipolar world. The question is, where do we go from here? How will these Trump tariffs and Trump economic threats and also now military threats play a role in the future of these relations and the development of this still budding multipolar world? And, to help me break it down is an expert in the matters of economy, Paulo Nogueira Batista Jr. He's a Brazilian economist. He was the vice president of the Brics New Development Bank, the NDB, from 2015 to 2017, and the executive director for Brazil and other countries in the International Monetary Fund from 2007 to 2015. So without further ado, Mr. Batista Jr., how are you doing? Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, it's a great honor. I'm curious, during your time at the IMF, which is it's so interesting to be talking to you. What sort of challenges did you face? Did you see the weaponization of the IMF, of this international, organization of finance capital scheming against countries like your own and countries across Latin America?
Well, the IMF is a double-faced institution. On the one hand, it is a technical, well-organized financial institution that supports countries in many ways, including technical assistance, lending, surveillance, macroeconomic. That's the positive side of the fund. However, this positive side has been obscured and ruined in a sense by what you just said, by the political use of the fund. In fact, the IMF and the World Bank are part of the weaponry of the West, United States and its allies. The institution, the IMF and the World Bank as well, are controlled by the United States in alliance with its European partners. And how do they weaponize the IMF? In many ways, but I'll give you just one example or two. Countries that are seen as allies or satellites of the West get a lot of money with little questions asked, or with a lot of tolerance. It's the case of Ukraine. Ukraine has had many programs over the years, failed programs, macroeconomically unsound, but the fund, the IMF, has been supporting Ukraine for political reasons. The same goes for Greece. Greece was in the interest of the European Union, the euro area. Greece was to be supported to allow the euro area to survive that Greek shock. And so Greece received immense amounts of money extended by the fund. Now, on the other hand, countries that are not cooperative or seen as hostile to the West, they may well want, as members of the IMF, to get support in times of balance of payments difficulties, but they will find doors closed. If a country hostile to the West wants support in the IMF, the issue will even not come to the executive board. It will be blocked beforehand, because the staff and the management of the fund always consult before any major decision with the United States and with Europe. That has not changed, I believe. So the fund is actually in a legitimacy crisis, because it does not reflect the world as it is, the multipolar world, and it is a tool, a political tool, largely of the United States and Europe.
And as a founding member of the New Development Bank, what was the idea going into that? Because, I read a lot of economists, and there's some people who put forward the notion that New Development Bank Brics is to serve as an alternative to IMF and the Western-led financial system. But then there's some people who say, well, we want to, collaborate, but offer a more equal footing for the rest of the world. What was the idea going into this, and how have you seen it develop, and how is it developing now?
Well, you see, the BRICS are also a two-faced group. They have an external diplomatic face, which is the one you just mentioned. We are creating institutions to cooperate with the existing ones in a peaceful fashion. But there's a reality behind this diplomatic facade, which is the fact that the BRICS came together because these large countries of the emerging world are not represented effectively with the voice they need to have in the Washington-based institutions. So frustration in China, Russia, Brazil, India, and other countries led to the creation of the BRICS as a group, and in a second moment, 2014, the actual creation of financial mechanisms. You mentioned the NDB, the New Development Bank, but also the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, a reserve pooling arrangement that was created at the same time to serve the same purposes that the IMF serves. So it's a complex. I can tell you for sure, the BRICS are not aggressive in their rhetoric to this day, but we would never have created the New Development Bank and the Contingent Reserve Arrangement if we were satisfied with the way the international financial and monetary system works. That's part of the issue. It's not the only issue. That's part of the reasons why we, as emerging market countries, BRICS countries, are willing to, go a separate route to some extent.
So how much of it do you think is a facade? Because we always see the press statements come out and, we're not pursuing any de-dollarization or anything like that. Alternative currencies, they say. But the truth is, de-dollarization has been happening for a long time. And it doesn't mean creating an alternative currency. That hasn't been tabled at any of the BRICS summits, as far as I understand. But this process is ongoing and increasing.
That's right. De-dollarization is an ongoing process. And there are reasons for this. It's not a result of anti-US sentiment. It's actual practical reasons. So if you look, for example, at the transactions between countries, emerging market countries, developing countries, they are largely now being carried out in national currencies, bypassing the US dollar. If you look at the reserves of the central banks all over the world, they're carefully moving away from the US dollar, from US treasuries to other international assets, gold, for example. No accident that the gold price has been rising so steeply in recent years and in recent months. And China, for example, used to have, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me right, $1.4 trillion in treasury bonds. After what the US and Europe did to Russian reserves in 2022, China became alarmed and began to diversify, began to sell T-bonds and buy other assets, notably gold, so it seems. So de-dollarization of reserves is going on. De-dollarization of transactions is going on. Now, what the next step would be, in my opinion, would be the creation of effectively an alternative to SWIFT, the Western-dominated SWIFT system of transactions. It has also been weaponized, so countries cannot fully trust the SWIFT anymore. So Russia, for example, last year, you may have heard of this, proposed a relatively detailed scheme for creating a BRICS payment system. This was recognized and, in a sense, endorsed by the leaders in Kazan in their summit. And the next step, in my opinion, would be to, go ahead with this. Now, there's a political economy issue, which you alluded to, which is Trump, the Trump effect. What effects will Trump have on the activities of the BRICS? Because, the U.S., you're an American citizen yourself, you know better than I. The U.S. can do a lot of damage to any country around the world. So countries look at this new American president, full of threats, full of bluster, full of measures, and they are cautious. So I wouldn't be surprised if the BRICS slow down a little bit their joint activities in terms of de-dollarization as of now, to wait and see what Trump will bring about. Take, for instance, Jackson, take it into the case of Russia. Russia was leading the discussion in the BRICS on new monetary initiatives. Now, Russia is benefiting from Trump. It's one of the few countries in the world that is benefiting from the arrival of Donald Trump. For Russia, the main thing is to solve the Ukrainian issue, to consolidate its victory there. So if that means being a little more cautious in terms of the US dollar, that will happen. I mean, I understand fully that Russia has its own national priorities, as do other countries of the BRICS.
It's understandable. It's pragmatic, and it's not the accelerationist route, but it is very understandable. You mentioned the alternatives to SWIFT. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's some alternatives that exist within sovereign countries already, but not a BRICS-wide alternative to SWIFT. Is that correct? And how do these systems operate?
Yeah, we can draw on the experience that China has with its own national system. Russia has, I believe Iran has as well. But this would be a multilateral, or let's say plurilateral framework if it were to be created. The Russians have proposed calling it BRICS Cross-Border Payment Initiative, BCPI. They did a lot of studies last year, quite well done. And now Brazil is chairing the BRICS. Russia chaired the BRICS last year, and Brazil is chairing the BRICS this year. So I hope my country can continue to work on this. I mean, it would look very bad for the BRICS, let me be quite frank here. Very bad for all the BRICS if they sort of catch a cold when Donald Trump sneezes and become afraid of, continuing their work for a multipolar world. This will be a big disappointment for not only for us in our own countries, in the BRICS countries, but for the whole world, because you see, the whole global south, to use the expression that is used now more frequently, the global south looks to the BRICS as an alternative. It looks to China, it looks to Russia, it looks to the group as an alternative to the Western dominated, skewed, vitiated system that we have since World War II. And it's getting worse. As the West declines, relatively speaking, they become increasingly prone to weaponizing, to distorting the system they have created. So, to use frank and aggressive language, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Eurasia, Asia are fed up with the West, with the way the West tries to run the world. Nobody's happy with the situation. They may not confront the West at every point of time, but they are fully conscious of the fact that this system is not working for the world as a whole. It's working for the narrow national interests of a small group of high-income countries, mainly those on both sides of the North Atlantic.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the leadership of the technical economic side of BRICS at the moment? I can't say I'm an expert on the names and the characters who are involved, as I'm sure you could. And I'm not asking you to air dirty laundry, but do you feel as though the economic leaders within BRICS that are dealing with these mechanical areas are fully equipped and backed to enough of a degree to actually carry out their work, or do you feel as though there is a crisis of leadership right now?
Well, let me tell you, I think the BRICS are still evolving. They are not yet ready to, for example, create an alternative currency to the US dollar, although this may happen in the future, in the medium to long term. If the dollar continues to be used as a weapon, if the United States doesn't put its house in order, its financial and fiscal house in order, that's the basic element needed to have trust in a currency. So if the U.S. is a fiscal mess, if the U.S. weaponizes its currency and the financial system, we will move. Technically, it's not easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy because the complexities of the process, an alternative to SWIFT, a unit of account, a new reserve currency are quite challenging. We can do it. We have economists in the 10 countries now, part of the BRICS, that can carry this out. I think the main difficulty is political, because that's a complex issue. Let me just give you one side of it. The BRICS are a group similar to the G20 in the way it functions, similar to the G7. It's an informal group, no secretariat, no permanent body of people working for the group. It has a rotating chairmanship among the countries. No permanent secretariat, no rules. And one of the informal rules that are quite strong is the rule of consensus. Countries want to take decisions or make pronouncements strictly on the basis of a consensus, understood rather rigidly as unanimity. So, for example, on this issue that you have raised, currency, financial initiatives, India, for reasons we can discuss, is very reluctant. The foreign minister of India has more than once spoken out against anything that might look as though it's against the US dollar. So India is not helping. India is reluctant. Now, Russia has been more interested for obvious reasons because Russia was one of the main victim of the weaponization of the financial system by the US and Europe. So Russia was leading the process. And China, China is a curious country. China is very opaque and very cautious. And any move it makes in a controversial area will be done very slowly, very professionally, as they always do. So we need to have a Chinese long-term view on these issues, a typically Chinese long-term view, because the problems that we are facing, that the BRICS are attempting to solve or help solve, are problems that will remain with us. I mean, I don't think it's plausible that the United States and Europe will put their act together, understand that the system is not working to the benefit of the world, and reform. They won't. I can tell you they won't. The resistance to reform in the United States, in Europe, with respect to the international financial and monetary system is immense, so intense that I do not believe that the system is reformable at all. So if the BRICS want to move forward, that's what I've been saying to all my interlocutors. We need to be ready to cautiously construct an alternative international monetary and financial system. That's a big order, I know. But if the BRICS are serious about bringing about a change in the status quo, that's ultimately what we need to do.
I agree. And people have to be willing to recognize the fact that Trump, assuming nothing changes, no loopholes are made, is only going to be here for 4 years. And who knows what we'll have after that. It's probably a total return to the status quo. But, one thing that I think people should take the time to look at, if there is this lull in rapid aggression in the development of BRICS and NDB in this period of time, or maybe some of the shortcomings of the new development bank. What do you say are the shortcomings, some of the failures thus far that still need to be addressed moving forward for the new development bank?
Again, the BRICS are a group that is evolving over time. If you look at the new development bank, which is the main practical initiative of the BRICS so far, it has achieved results. It's there. If you visit Shanghai, you will find a big building, a staff, administration, projects approved, but it's moving forward very slowly. I'll give you an example. When I helped found the bank in 2015, we had the view that the bank would be, in the medium term, a global bank, acting in all continents of the world to support developing countries, a bank of the global south for the global south, we could say. Now, this has not happened. Why? Because very few countries have joined the bank so far. You have the 5 founding members, the BRICS, the old group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and a few additional countries have come in. I think only 4 or 5, I believe, or 4, because Uruguay has yet to complete its procedures. So we have Bangladesh, we have Algeria, we have Egypt, we have United Arab Emirates, and Uruguay still to complete the process. So with 10 members, or 9, you cannot be a global bank, because you need to lend to member countries chiefly. So this has been frustrating. But for example, the US dollar, it largely is the currency in which the NDB operates, which is sort of ironic, because we speak about de-dollarization, and our main practical initiative, the bank, the New Development Bank, operates chiefly in US dollars. But even there, some progress was made, We have about, let me see, I think it's something like 20 to 25% of financial operations in currencies other than the dollar, mainly renminbi. So some de-dollarization of the bank is ongoing, but a lot of work has to be done still to make the bank, fulfill the expectations we had when we created these banks, this bank and the contingent reserve arrangement, which is potentially an alternative to the IMF.
I see. What do you think the reasoning behind that slow expansion of not just Brics members but then members of the New Development Bank is? Is this it seems like this is done on purpose. You have every year you have a few members that are either added or named as partner countries. Um and also, so do you think it's done on purpose, and why is it so slow? And then also, um, moving forward, as the organization grows, do you think we'll see the continued unanimous consent decision making, or do you think maybe we'll see something like a parliament take place?
Why is the expansion so slow? We here need to distinguish between the expansion of the political formation of the BRICS and the expansion of the membership of the New Development Bank of the BRICS. The second thing, that the bank's expansion in terms of member countries, is actually very important. It's a win-win proposition for the bank and for the developing world. The reason why it's not moving forward, we can discuss this. Sometimes one country is reluctant, other times the other country is reluctant. There's this tendency to try to operate always on consensus. This slows down everything. Now, if you look at the group, the political formation of the BRICS, that's something different. There, we need to proceed with caution because a very large and quick expansion, unplanned, of the group may actually harm the effectiveness of the group. On the one hand, it's nice to have a lot of countries wanting to join the BRICS political formation. It shows the prestige of the BRICS in the world. It shows also what I was mentioning before, the dissatisfaction of the developing world with the West. So they look to the BRICS and want to join the BRICS. That's fine. But if the BRICS become too large, too fast, there will be so immense coordination problems within the group, especially if we stick to the tradition of consensus, which effectively gives veto power to any single member. So I would proceed cautiously. Last year, Russia, in its chairmanship of the BRICS, Russia did not bring in new members, right? Russia created a new category, partner countries. 12 joined. And now this year, Indonesia joined. January this year, Indonesia came in. So Indonesia is the 9th or 10th country of the group. And it's, of course, a very important economy, a very important country. So Indonesia coming in is quite clearly a plus for the group. But now we have the situation. We have the 5 original members. We have Iran, we have Egypt, we have Ethiopia, we have United Arab Emirates, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yes. And we have Indonesia. So it's 10. And Saudi Arabia, something which is not usually noticed. Saudi Arabia was invited, but has not yet said yes or no. It's sitting on the fence for political reasons, certainly. So we have, in effect, 10 countries in the political formation, and it will be a challenge already to coordinate positions among these 10. Let me give you an example, coming back to your first question, the IMF. Among the new members of the political formation, Egypt and Ethiopia are countries that are now under IMF programs. Now, this makes them vulnerable to Western pressure because you don't need to have been 8 years in the IMF like I was in the executive board to know that a country to approve and to execute an IMF program, a lending program with conditionality, needs the support of the United States and Europe. Practically, in practice, it needs that support. So if Egypt or Ethiopia were to take a stance as members of the BRICS that displeases the US and Europe, Egypt and Ethiopia may find that they will be pressed to conform to the political values and needs of the West that dominates the IMF and other institutions. So it's a tricky thing, this expansion of the BRICS. It needs to be, because I don't want the BRICS, we don't want the BRICS to become a talk shop, a large group of countries that come together, a new G77, a new United Nations where speeches are made, United Nations of the South, many speeches, many proclamations, many communiques, and no effective action. So we need to be cautious there, I believe.
How do you think Trump's tariff threats are going to impact the future development here? You kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. But as I mentioned in the opening, the threats that he's made against Russia, China, and Iran have not caused many in those countries to budge, at least in the most powerful positions. And obviously, these are unrelated. They're not related directly to BRICS, but it has been very surprising to see. And it almost looks like a coordinated response in some ways. They knew Trump was coming, and they're holding a line. How do you think the tariffs and other various economic, military, political threats that I'm sure Trump will, he will unveil might impact BRICS' development over the next 4 years?
Well, first of all, we need to see how strong Trump will remain as president of the United States over time. It's not clear. He may become weaker faster than you now could think. He looks very strong. But a person that's very strong, or a country that's very strong, does not need to threaten everybody repeatedly and take unilateral action. Theodore Roosevelt, US president of the early 20th century, used to say, speak softly and carry a big stick. Trump speaks loudly, and his stick is not as strong as it was before because the United States is declining relatively. So I don't believe that Trump is actually doing, I may be wrong, but I don't believe Trump is strengthening the United States. For example, I don't understand why. Maybe you can explain to me. It's a tricky question. Why does Trump feel that he needs to be so hostile to countries that are traditionally allied with the United States? Canada, Europeans. You can even say that they are satellites of the United States, have been for a long time. Now, why treat them in this manner with tariffs, threats, humiliations, including? I fail to understand how this makes America great again. It probably makes America weaker, less reliable. Everybody looks at the way the United States are behaving now and thinks, what country what is this country? No? And coming to the BRICS, which was your question, the United States is a powerful country still, very powerful economically, militarily, politically. It can do a lot of damage around the world, even in solid countries like China. And BRICS, of course, look at this with concern. One reason is that if you go to all over the world, to countries in the developing world, in Europe, everywhere, inside these countries you have a group of interests, a powerful group of local interests that have ties to the United States, political, intellectual, psychological, These groups work as fifth columns inside the countries. And the Americans are very used to activating these internal allies against the government that they don't like, a government they wish to destabilize. They have done this many times. So countries are concerned. You see, you have this big country governed by a person that sometimes looks sort of unhinged. And people are, look, this guy, what is this? Is there a method in this madness? Is the question that everybody's asking. Huh? It's not easy. Sometimes you can understand what Trump is looking for. For example, he wants Europe to share more the cost of defending NATO countries. That's understandable, including because the United States is financially weak, fiscally weak, so it needs more support. But is the manner in which Trump is doing this correct, with threats, bullying, public, aggressive statements? What does he gain from that? I fail to see. So if you look at the way the countries are responding to him, from Denmark to China, from France to Brazil, everybody's treating him cautiously because you never know what a guy so aggressively hostile to even friends might do to countries he sees as hostile or not cooperative. So everybody's, being very careful. And the crucial question, which is still to be made clear, is whether he will weaken or strengthen the United States with these measures and threats and new policies that he's adopting.
Mm-hmm. And as a last question, what are your hopes for the Brics Summit, which is next going to be hosted in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil? I believe this is a first, that it won't be a full year in which we are having to wait for the conference. It's happening a little bit quicker on the calendar, under a year since the last one in Kazan. Do you think this is productive? And do you have any big hopes for the Brics Summit in Brazil, which is going to be, I guess, under the leadership of Lula da Silva, who has seemingly changed his tune, I guess is a good way of putting it, since earlier on in his career?
Well, this you touched upon an important issue here, which is the unprecedented holding of the Brics Summit in the middle of the year. Insofar as I remember, that never happened. It's always towards the end of the year. Now, this may cut short. This is an unfortunate decision by the Brazilian government. I tried to argue against it with my friends and acquaintances in Brasilia, explain why. Because what happens, the risk is that Brazilian presidency will be a 6-month presidency. So what I have suggested publicly and privately, and what I think some people in the government are trying to do, is to continue the presidency after the summit by hosting meetings of various levels, ministers, Sherpas, deputies, and I suggested that a final meeting of the leaders be done this year on the occasion of the G20 summit in November in South Africa. So then Brazil will finalize its presidency and hand over the results to the next presidency, which is India in 2026. But you're right. I mean, it makes no sense to hold the the reason why Brazil felt it would be too much for the country to host COP in Belém in November and the Brics Summit at more or less at the same time. So it was a very cautious decision, pessimistic decision. Oh, God. And I'll add something else to finalize. It may reflect the fact that I just mentioned, that there are many people influential in Brazil, in the government, that are not sympathetic to Brics. So these internal groups that are more linked to the West, let's say Western-oriented forces, may help understand why Brazil takes some steps sometimes that are not defensible at all, as the one you just mentioned.
It's crazy. And for those of you listening, COP is the Conference of the Parties. It's the United Nations climate change event. So, heaven forbid we have a something like Brics. Gotta put that earlier on the calendar, I guess. And COP gets to have their correct date. It's really crazy. Well, anyways, I guess we'll all continue watching with a very close eye as to how this develops. Paulo, thank you so much for joining me. I learned a lot in this discussion, and I'd love to have you back on again and discuss more as the Brics Summit, the early Brics Summit approaches. So where can people find your work, your books, and anything else you want to share with them moving forward?
Well, I'm also present in social networks on X, on Instagram, Facebook. It's easy to find me there, and I have a portal in the internet under my name, in which where I place my papers, references to my publications. So that's one channel which can be used to contact me. And thank you for having me on your important program, and I'll be glad to come back when the occasion arises.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Very good. Thank you again.